elder parole and married family parole for the state senate and the state assembly to pass these bills this session so that we can bring our elders home, restore community. Yes. So you're going to hear from a couple folks today, some Rochelle folks, some people who've been impacted, and just hear our stories and let them know, let everybody know in Westchester and the Senate and the Assembly that we need these bills passed. So first I'm going to introduce Jeffrey Deskovic, longtime RAD supporter, an ally, and we're going to have him say a few words about the bill.
Thank you very much. So, right here. All right.
I'll go over here.
Everyone can hear?
Yes.
All right, so my name's Jeff Deskovic, and I spent 16 years incarcerated wrongfully from age 17 to 32 prior to being exonerated through DNA testing. My case was a Westchester case. I'm an attorney now, and I started the Jeff Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which frees wrongfully convicted people and pursues policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening. But while I was wrongfully incarcerated, I saw a lot of disturbing things which lead me to advocate for parole reform and other justice reform issues, non-innocence relief. So the focal point today, of course, is for parole. So firstly, there's fair and timely parole. So in a nutshell, the way that things work right now, rather than the parole board determine whether or not somebody's been rehabilitated, which would be assessed by looking at their disciplinary record and looking at what type of program accomplishments that they've done. You know, many people have participated in programs that actually give back to the community. So rather than the parole board determine whether if somebody was released, that they would remain at liberty without breaking the law, too many times people are denied parole by the parole board simply referencing nature of the crime.
That ain't
in other words,
right.
what the charge is for. That's something that will never change. That was known on day one. The judge took that into account when fashioning a sentence. To deny parole based only on the charge itself is to completely walk away from any belief in rehabilitation. I went to the parole board. I did 16 years, so my sentence was 15 to life. I went to the parole board, and the parole board noted that I had an excellent educational record, that I had a good disciplinary record, that I had some letters of support, including a letter of support from a prison employee, but that nonetheless I was being denied parole because they wrote that to release me would be to lessen its seriousness. They referenced the nature of the charge. So I was impacted by that. I served an extra year in prison that I didn't have to serve. Similarly, I saw many other people go to the parole board. Many of the prisoners were model prisoners. Many of them had been living in honor block, had gone years without getting a disciplinary ticket. Some of them had college degrees. They had completed rehabilitative programs. Nonetheless, they would go to the parole board and be denied. They would be ordered to repeat 2 more years, and then after that, go right back to the parole board, where they would be denied again. And then go back to the parole board, where they would be denied again. And go back to the parole board, where they would be denied again. Is anyone tired of hearing me say that?
Yes.
The men and women are tired of living that.
Yes.
I remember when I spoke to a lot of prisoners there, some of them told me, and this is speaking to the counterproductiveness of this denying parole based on nature of the crime. Some of them told me, well, Jeff, why should I bother turning my life around? Why should I rehabilitate myself? Why should I learn anything? Why should I take any programs addressing the crime for which I committed and locked up for, when I go to the parole board, they're not letting me out anyway? This is why it's important to have this fair and timely parole legislation passed. Now the second bill, which is kind of, it could be thought of and should be thought of as a companion bill, is what's referred to as elder parole. And so what that bill says is that if a prisoner is 55 years old and they've also served 15 years, they would be guaranteed a parole hearing. Not guaranteed a release, but guaranteed a parole hearing to have it fairly and objectively considered whether they've been rehabilitated.
Yes.
I saw many, here's why that's critical. I saw many prisoners there who were elderly. First of all, it's a dirty secret, that's not a secret to anybody, that the medical care in prison is substandard. That's number one. Number two is that while that's true generally, the prison is particularly not suited for the advanced medical needs of elders. I saw a lot of prisoners there who were on dialysis. Many of them were not healthy enough to even live in a cell. They were living in a hospital located on the prison grounds. Many of them were literally pushed around in a wheelchair or hunched over with canes. These are people's grandpas, grandmas, sons, daughters, fathers, mothers. These are people we're talking about. No one's talking about getting away with crimes. But when they've served a substantial portion of their sentence and they're elderly, what is it? We have to have the ultimate revenge? They have to die in prison? Is mistreatment through negligence by the prison not having adequate medical facilities? That has to be part of the sentence too? That's not humane. It's not humane. I saw many. Let me hear it. If you agree with what I'm saying, let me hear from you. You know, speaking of the financial aspects to this, the last time I checked, a few years ago, they were claiming that it cost $72,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. So when it comes to deserving prisoners whose sentence minimum is up, this policy of denying parole repeatedly has a very serious tax implication. Rather than money going to social programs, it's going to incarcerate people further still who don't need to be incarcerated. It goes to incarcerating elderly people. Many of those elderly prisoners that I saw were role model prisoners. They were mentoring the young guys that were coming in on how to stay out of trouble and orient their time to doing programs that would benefit them once they return back to society. But these are the same people who need to deny parole over and over again.
That ain't right.
So in closing, let me say this, that there's a such thing called aging out of crime. It's proven that many people, that when you're younger, you're more susceptible to peer pressure and bad influences. You're more spontaneous. And so you do things without quite thinking through. And sometimes those are mistakes. Sometimes those are serious crimes. But as people go on in years, and they mellow out, and they wisen up, and they realize that they want to live a crime-free life, and they'd like to return back to society to rejoin their family, and they rehabilitate themselves, why should they not be paroled? Why do they, when someone's rehabilitated, they've done 15 years and they're elderly, why do they have to do another 10 years? Why do they got to do another 20 years? For what? What's the purpose? Just for a business? To profit? That's not an adequate reason. That's not humane. So I call on the legislature. I call on the Westchester legislators in particular. Let's pass this elder parole. Let's pass very timely parole. Do you want parole justice?
Yeah.
You want parole justice?
Yeah.
You want parole justice?
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you that the leader of the Senate is Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who is a resident of Westchester. I call on the senator, let's get these bills passed.
Yes.
You're in leadership, you have a supermajority of legislators, let's get it done. We want it done this session. When do we want it?
Now.
Now, right? When do we want it?
Now.
When do we want it? Now. When do we want it?
Right now.
Let me hear you say parole justice.
Parole justice.
Parole justice.
Parole justice.
afternoon, family. It's a privilege and a blessing to be with you, fellowship and struggle. I am the president of the NAACP Rochelle branch. I am the president of the Interreligious Coalition of New Rochelle. I am a minister at the Generations Church of New Rochelle. But that is not the reason why I'm here. I'm here because I'm a human being. Before I was president of any organization, I was a human being. Before I was a citizen of New Rochelle, I was a human being. Even before I was a black man, I was a human being. And so I'm here to speak out against the inhumanity of keeping an old elderly person locked up indefinitely. I'm here to speak out against the inhumanity of not giving a prisoner that has served his time due process. I'm here to speak against the inhumanity of mass incarceration. And so the great Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. He said agitate, agitate, agitate. And so what you see here now on display is democracy at work. What you see here on display right now is principled struggle for justice. And we are here to put the justice back into the criminal justice system. We need justice. And finally, the great Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so, we need to continue to fight. Because if we walk along that arc, eventually justice will come to us. How long? Not long. Because God is a God of justice. How long? Not long. Because evil cannot reign forever. How long? Not long. We will obtain justice for our elderly and for those who are incarcerated. Jesus said, what determines your worth, what determines your humanity and your righteousness is how you treat those who are the least of these. How you treat those who are the most vulnerable in our society. And who is more vulnerable than those who are locked up and cannot enjoy freedom? And so I say to you, I leave this motto of the NAACP is that we have to fight. Because when we fight, we win. 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 God bless you. And have his smile upon you.
Yes. Parole justice now! 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 Yes. I know Minister Mark McLean brought someone along with him.
Hello everyone, I stand before you today. My name is Dimas Salivarios. I'm a filmmaker in the area. I made a movie called Emmanuel with Steph Curry, Viola Davis, and Mariska Hargitay from Law and Order. I also recently made a film called Chicago, America's Hidden War that made the Oscars list.
All right.
But I want to tell you also what I am. I have a felony record. I was arrested for selling drugs 13 times. I am someone that people thought probably wouldn't amount to much. With a felony on my record for selling drugs, never a violent crime. for, being a young man chasing after gold, jewelry, and flashy cars.
Yeah.
I never knew how guns started to flood my community, but they did. And they never tracked those guns back to those that so-called got them lost, and they ended up here in New York City from Virginia down in North Carolina. But this is the reality of what goes on. But I ended up later on in my life receiving a pardon for a judge that would be standing with us today. I was facing 7 years for an escape charge, where I escaped from parole with my handcuffs on when they were taking me to Rikers Island. I went down south, I met the Lord Jesus Christ. That was my road, and I turned my life around. I came back to New York City, turned myself in, ready to face 7 years. And the judge looked at me and looked at my mugshots and stared at me and stared at my mugshots. And she said, I'm going to do something I never did before. She said, I'm going to release you. And she said, I'm going to tell you why. You look and sound so different than the person you used to be. And I don't want to send you back to jail so that you can become who you used to be or something worse.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone sometimes needs a shot and a second chance.
Yes.
I never was arrested again except for Amadou Diallo, when I stood up for righteousness.
There you go.
But I just want to share, after that I went and got my master's degree.
There you go.
I went and turned my life around. I'm a homeowner.
Yes.
I have a wife and I have children.
Yes.
And now I'm a filmmaker.
Yes.
There are many guys like me that never had this kind of opportunity or this kind of chance to turn their lives around.
Yes.
So I think wisely, we need to find these cases, these situations of people that need that shot to have a second chance to live a productive life. Thank you so much.
Can I just say, his film is showing tomorrow, a week's run. It's showing it at Regal Theater. And it is a powerful documentary on gun violence and gang violence. And you live in New Rochelle, we've been facing that adversity. We've had 6 drive-by shootings in less than a year.
Wow.
And this film really speaks to that. And I encourage you to come and see that film. Chicago, America's Hidden War. And the African American Advisory Committee and the Clergy Response Team, we have Bishop Raymond here who runs the Clergy Response Team. The city has invested in that movie and has paid for free showings for folks in the heritage homes and races projects where this gun violence is centered at. But I encourage you, strongly encourage you, find your way to Regal Theater and see this movie. It's a life-changing movie, and you will surely be blessed. Thank you.
Bring them home. I'm going to introduce now Greg Thompson, who's a new rap member and a friend of mine. He's going to tell you a little bit about his story, his time. Insights of right here.
My name is Brother Thompson. My name is Brother Thompson. I was formerly incarcerated, having served approximately 37 years before the parole board saw fit to release me. The judge imposed a 20-year sentence, yet the parole panel usurped the power of the court and resentenced me. Despite an immaculate disciplinary deportment, as well as my programmatic achievements while serving my sentence. When the board finally granted parole, I was almost 65 years of age. and had pre-existing medical conditions. In short, the average prisoner's life expectancy is 57 years. Therefore, I am grateful to be alive today.
Yes.
A distinguished jurist of the Court of Appeals once wrote, "Justice delayed is justice denied."
Right.
In light of the recent passing of an elderly prisoner who had been granted parole, who died unexpectedly within days or perhaps weeks before his impending release to parole supervision. So we therefore say parole delayed is parole denied.
Right, yeah.
Our motto, parole justice is racial justice. Communities of color have been unfairly targeted by the scourge of mass incarceration and hyper-incarceration. Black criminality was written into the United States Constitution. In fact, Article 4 of that document, the Fugitive Slave Act, requires fugitive slaves to be deported. According to the 13th Amendment, involuntary servitude nor slavery, except for a party who has been duly convicted of the crime thereof, shall exist within the United States. So whether we are talking about the plantation system or we're talking about the prison system, by any other name, it's still slavery.
Right. Right.
President Nixon advised his chief of staff to emphasize the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. And the key is to devise a system that recognizes it without adhering to it. I believe that President Nixon was indirectly alluding to mass incarceration of communities of color. In closing, I would like to thank everyone for their continued support of the fair and timely parole bill, and most importantly, for your attendance here today, blessing us here today. With that, thank you.
Now we're just going to introduce Luke from Vocal. They're going to tell you a little bit more about the bills and then how to get involved too.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Luke Grandis. Pronouns are they, them, theirs. Upstate lead organizer for Vocal New York, Voices of Community Activists and Leaders. These bills are absolutely vital and crucial to restoring justice in the state of New York. When we're looking at individuals who are 55 years old and older, who have served 15 years while incarcerated, to simply say they deserve the right to appear before the parole board. We should not even have to be out here right now to say that. And for some legislators to only be signing on to one bill, but not the other, it's moot. How can we make sure that elder parole, that when it is passed, that folks are given the opportunity to be seen for who they are today and not on that one piece of paper that will never change from the day they were arrested? Nothing will ever change that paper, but the years that they spent facing, traumatizing, perpetual trauma while incarcerated, solitary confinement while incarcerated, being purposely aggravated by correctional officers to add on charges to lengthen their sentences. That if a legislator is going to sign on to elder parole, we demand you sign on and co-sponsor fair and timely parole, because you need to be seen for who you are today. What else is the point of the programs we provide in these facilities where folks are able to get their GED, their bachelor's degree, their PSAC degrees, to treat people with substance use issues, to show all of the incredible ways in which they've transformed themselves, as you've seen here today from individuals. Why, and I ask you, for the assembly members and senators, would you sign on to elder parole and not fair and timely? Because if they are going to appear before the board, we must ensure that they are seen for who they are today. Giving them that hearing will do nothing other than saying that you did something for mass incarceration this session as an elected. That is not good enough. We need both bills. No reason to not sign on to both bills to demand and have these passed this session, so that we do not need to be out here again next year demanding the same thing. So many individuals who are mentors for individuals while incarcerated, that could be out in the community, that could be out here in Westchester County, in Albany, in Rochester, in Syracuse, in Buffalo, in New York City. This is not a New York City only issue, and we are here to show them that we have support throughout the entire state, that this is an issue affecting people incarcerated throughout the entire state. And when these mentors can be brought home to their families, to their loved ones, these people are people. Someone said earlier, before I was anything, I was a person. And the value behind these bills, every piece of legislation is an oral document. Therefore, anyone who sponsors these bills can be a moral ambassador. They can support the truth and the reality that we need these mentors back in our community, to show individuals, especially young folks, different ways that they can, different opportunities and different ways to get involved in different aspects in their communities and life than they might know otherwise. If young folks only grow up and see what's around them, but they don't have any mentors to show them, hey, you know that there's this community center you can get involved in. Hey, do you know that your voice matters, right? That those folks who are serving as mentors behind bars, we need you back in our communities. We've seen the power that comes from folks being able to be brought home from incarceration to truly serve the youth, their family, and also just to be able to have their lives back. Yes. The recidivism rate of people over 55 is 2.5%. What is the risk there? There is none, right? So we demand that every legislator who has signed on to elder parole signs on to fair and timely, to make sure that those bills do exactly what they're meant to do. Otherwise, we see your sponsorship as performative. We see it as you abusing, but we are not abusing, and we will not truly show you that we have your full support until we see that you support both of these pieces of legislation, because people in prison are people. And we need to make sure that that narrative is driven home, and that folks understand that, and that we undo everything from the Jim Crow era, and that we take back every right that was stripped from these individuals. give them back and give them a chance at life and a chance at community reinvestment. Thank you all. We will not stop fighting. We are not going anywhere. We will be out here. We will be out in every part of New York State until these bills are passed. But we want them passed now. And so we say to every assembly member, senator, a Senate Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, Carl Hastie, bring these bills to a vote. We know that we have the votes. Even beyond co-sponsorship, we know folks will vote yes. Bring it to the floor. Don't run that clock out. Bring it to the floor. Make the vote happen and make it happen now.
Yeah. All right.
Bring it to the floor! 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 Bring it to the floor!
Okay, everybody, I'm just going to introduce one last speaker, Legislator David Marr, County Legislator David Marr, who represents parts of Rochelle, just to talk again about the community support behind it.
Thank you, and it's so great to see so many familiar faces. I am your representative. For many of you, I'm your representative. You're my boss. I'm here as your servant. I have to be here as someone who's over 55. God help me, I'm over 65 at this point. And again, as Mr. Mark McLean said, I'm here as a visitor. What I can do for you as a county legislator is continue to fight to get people out of the jail, the county jail, to reduce incarceration and restraint while they're there awaiting trial as defendants and not convicted persons. More importantly, since I can't directly affect our state law, I need you to write to me and my colleagues so that we can contact directly your other servants, state representatives. They listen to us, especially when we have support from folks like you. Very easy email address for me is my last name, R-M-A-G-R, at westchesterlegislators.com. If you know who your county legislator is, you answer with their last name. What to do as a person of some wisdom now, age 65, yes, people do change. People become less volatile. 2.5% recidivism rate. That's almost nothing. I mean, if you look at the rest of the general population, why not just throw us all in jail? We have probably a higher likelihood than any one of us may commit some crime. As a human being, let's do what we can to humanize the folks who are incarcerated now. I know my friends at New Law, we try to get out Christmas cards, holiday cards, a list of folks that we get. And when you sit there and write a personalized card to someone, it really makes you consider and understand the loss they're suffering for being thrown away for so long. And I can't guarantee you'll get a letter back, but I have. Sometimes I've done it every single time. And again, you realize the humanity of the folks that are now in correspondence with. So I just leave it with that suggestion again. When do we want elder parole?
Now!
When do we want fair and timely parole?
Now!
When do we want elder parole?
Now!
When do we want fair and timely parole hearings?
Now!
You have to work on this, folks.
I think, as everybody said, the most important thing everybody can do now is call your legislators, call Andres Cousins, call Amy Paulin, call Steve Otis, call Shelley Mayer. Tell them that you support this, that you're a constituent, that you want this passed, that whether you're impacted or you're not impacted, that this is important to communities, this is important for our taxes, this is important for our humanity, what we believe in, what we think is people, and we cannot have people dying in prison. We cannot sanction, the state cannot sanction death, they cannot sentence you to death, and that's what these bills will help prevent: sickness, aging, and dying in prison. I have palm cards for folks if you want, to help you find your legislator. And let's continue to fight. We only have until June 10th to get these passed. If you want more information, we're going to do more rallies. So thank you all for coming. Appreciate you all.